On this episode, I sit down with author of Walt Disney World Hacks, Susan Veness. Today is April 30th, 2024. This is episode 663 of the Main Street Magic Podcast.
Jeremy and Rhonda are more than a little fond of Disney World, so they made this podcast to share it all with you. Reports and resorts, top 10 lists of all sorts, Main Street Magic's bringing it home for you.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Main Street Magic. I'm your host, Jeremy Stein, and while I'm not joined by Rhonda today, I will soon be joined by author Susan Veness. Make sure you check us out on the web at mainstmagic.com, as well as follow on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at mainstmagic. You can also catch us on TikTok at MSM Podcast. Then, if you haven't done so already, head out to Facebook and search for the Main Street Magic community and ask to join. If you hit that subscribe button, you get brand new episodes every Tuesday and Friday. If you're planning that trip to Disneyland or Walt Disney World, you did not get the advanced dining reservations you so desperately wanted, have no fear, because Mouse Dining removes the frustration of booking Disney dining reservations, alerting you when you spot availability for your desired restaurant, date, meal, and time. You can visit msmfriends.com to use this free service. Then finally, if you're getting ready to plan that trip to Walt Disney World, Disneyland, any of the Disney parks throughout the world, Universal parks, you're looking to go on a cruise or travel pretty much anywhere you can think of, you should head to mainstmagictravel.com and fill out a form for a free quote. Our travel services are completely free to you. Susan Veness is an international travel writer, researcher, online content provider, and itinerary planner specializing in all things Florida, Disney, all of Orlando's theme parks, and cruising. She is the author of several books, including The Hidden Magic of Walt Disney World series, the co-author of The Brit Guide to Orlando, and the biography Defying Expectations. She's been visiting Walt Disney World since it opened in 1971, and with a home just minutes from the mouse, she continues to tour the parks on a regular basis. Let's chat with Susan Veness. Susan, thank you so much for joining me today, and welcome to the Main Street Magic Podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
So one of the things I always like to chat with any guest first and ask them is what drew you to Disney, Walt Disney World specifically? Like, where does your love for Disney come from?
Well, as a kid, I always watched The Wonderful World of Disney, of course. And then I was living in Michigan, and we'd heard about this place, Walt Disney World. And my family was going down to Miami to visit some friends. We decided just to stop by and see what it was all about. This was shortly after Magic Kingdom had opened.
Wow.
I just remember it was this overwhelming place. It was like nothing we'd ever seen before. And then I didn't go again until after Epcot was opened. And I think my real love for Disney came while I was sitting in the Living Seas. Do you remember the pre-show they used to have there?
Yeah.
Where you watched the deluge, and it was, and then all of a sudden these doors open and you get to take a ride into an aquarium. And it was all these, just discovering all these levels of detail and layers of storytelling. That's really when I became a Disney addict.
So then, you've been going to Disney since opening. You have obviously experienced a lot. You've seen a lot there. When did the idea come to start writing about Disney and deciding, especially, this book, which is in your second edition, the Walt Disney World Hacks, like what led you to that, to thinking, hey, I have this knowledge, let me put it in book form. What was your path to getting to write this book? And then of course you have a few others about Disney.
Yeah, it started really with what became the Hidden Magic of Walt Disney World book series. Like I said, I loved those layers of detail. So my visits really started revolving around that. My husband said, "You need to turn this into a book." So that's when we did the Hidden Magic of Walt Disney World, the first edition. And out of that, that did really well. Out of that, the publisher said, let's do something else. Let's do another book. So we came up with this idea of doing hacks. And for me, I learned so much from longtime visitors when I was a new visitor. And you know how you just every time you go, you sort of learn something new.
Yeah.
And I just thought, wouldn't it be nice if somebody kind of took you by the hand as a friend and kind of walked you through some of the ways to make your trip a little bit easier and a little bit less stressful. So
Yeah.
that's how the first edition of Walt Disney World Hacks came up.
And that's been 5 years since the first edition. Have
Yeah.
what was harder, writing that first edition or having to update it for the second edition? With the amount of changes that have happened in the past 5 years, I feel like probably some of the most that we've seen in the history of Walt Disney World specifically. What was that like, saying, all right, I got to write this second edition now, coming out of COVID, coming out of so many different things that have changed at Disney, with including things now like Genie Plus, losing things like Magical Express. What was that process like?
Uh, it was a challenge writing the first one, only because it's always a challenge to write a book.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're right. The second one has been harder because Disney has really tightened up a lot of things that you used to. I don't like to break Disney's rules. It's really important to me not to do that. But they've tightened up a lot of things. And with Genie Plus, and as you say, it's a much more complicated vacation than it used to be. Um, and the other wrinkle to this was that when the publisher came and said, let's do a second edition of Hacks, I was just preparing for a year-long trip in an RV. My husband and I are traveling the country in an RV for a year,
Oh, wow.
which is why I don't know if you're hearing any background noise. We're in a campground right now. So that proved challenging, but I was really, really lucky to have a co-writer for this edition. So she could go, I could do all of my research, but she could go in and just check on things that maybe I wasn't quite sure of and use the Genie Plus system, which I had a chance to use it a little bit. But as you say, with the pandemic, and it was tough.
Yeah.
So having Samantha Davis Friedman as my co-writer really is what sort of gave me the ability to do the second edition. She was a great fact checker and really did use the Genie Plus system to make sure we knew everything worked.
Yeah. Well, that's so funny. You mentioned about the traveling in an RV as well. It's, as soon as I saw you on screen, I was like, that looks like an RV. We used to camp all the time. We love Fort Wilderness. We had a pop-up camper. We rent an RV every year and still go. And actually my brother-in-law and sister-in-law just got done with their first year as a full-time RV family, and they've got two young kids.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
good for them.
yeah, they traveled
Have
all
they
the way
enjoyed
west
it?
and all the way back, and they sold their house. They sold everything in it, and they bought a
Yeah.
huge fifth wheel, and they put a bunch of work into it. And so it's been interesting following them. So it's so cool to hear that you're doing that same thing. And after the first year, they decided to give it a shot at a second year. They weren't sure if they were going to settle down after that or what. So that's very,
Wow,
very
that's
cool.
that's so great. We are meeting so many people who
Yeah.
are now full time, and we weren't ready to really, pull a trigger on that one. We still have our house in Orlando, but
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's kind of an addictive lifestyle. It's really challenging, but really fun.
Yeah.
And to see this country, it just blows you away. It's amazing.
That's so cool. I love that. That's something I'd love to do once our kids are out of the house in, 5-10 years or so. I would love to do
Yes.
that with my wife. But so when
And
doing the
ideally,
research,
don't have a dog.
oh, that helps a lot.
Can really slow you down.
Yeah, that's our problem. We got 2 cats and 2 dogs. So that'd be tough to live out, I think, in an RV with those 4 around. But
It's challenging.
yeah. So as you're doing the research, I guess, what does that look like? And obviously you having Samantha help you on this one. How much of it is in the park and you are walking around and almost just figuring some of these out on your own? Because 350 plus is a lot. I think for
It's a lot.
anybody who are Disney veterans, if you said, just sit down and write a bullet list of what could start, I can't think of how many I'd get into. It certainly would be nowhere near this. So what's the process like of being in the park and starting to jot down some different hacks and expanding on them later, to doing research all throughout everything that's available, and obviously using somebody like Samantha? How does that whole process go?
Well, a lot of it came from experience, and there are still, there are still things that from almost from day one that are still viable. Everybody, probably everybody knows if the left-hand lane is open, take that instead of the right. But those things actually do, for the most part, still work. So there was some of that I had just learned over, the years of going. Um, like I say, we live, our house was right behind Magic Kingdom. There was Magic Kingdom, a lake, and our house.
Wow.
So we were in the parks all the time. And my husband and I have a travel writing business. So a lot of our work is around the theme parks in Orlando. So, it came from experience. It came from talking to cast members. It came from just talking to other people who figured out great ways to solve some problem.
Mm-hmm.
This time, going through and making sure all the hacks were still viable, and then having Samantha be in the parks, that was just a godsend.
Yeah.
So, but she did have to go in, and she did have to, use Genie Plus and try different things. And, I knew FastPass inside out, and it was as you know, it was just such a great system. If you knew how to work it, you could do really well with FastPass Plus. But Genie Plus is not like that.
No.
So, having her in there, really seeing what still worked, that was crucial.
So when you're writing this and putting this together, what do you almost define as a hack? Do you have a specific set of almost rules? Like, does it have to save time? Does it have to save money? Does it have to do certain things for you to consider it a hack? Because I feel like in this day and age, especially with social media, everybody calls everything a hack. And a lot of them you're looking at and you're like, well, is that really a hack? What is it doing? How do you feel about that? And when you prepare to put all these incredible hacks in your book?
Yeah, when I first started writing the book, that was a big question that I asked myself, what actually is a hack? And for me, it's sort of anything that's going to make your vacation better. That was kind of the what I boiled it down to. But tips, tricks, money saving, time saving, especially stress saving, those are all things that I would consider, hack worthy. But the book does also have things like, here's where you're going to find the camera on whatever attraction. So is that a hack? Isn't that a hack? I don't know. But for me, it was sort of, this is going to make your vacation better. So those kinds of things are included as well. I think it's a great question, and it was definitely a question I asked myself. What is a hack?
Yeah. Well, and
how would you define it?
Well, I think what you just mentioned, actually, I would think of it as normal ways of maybe it is a way to save time, maybe to save money. But what you just said, I think is so perfect, is it's any way that could make your trip better. And that does come down to knowing where ride photos are. So many times you see like Haunted Mansion, it's the first time and maybe the only time, it might be the last time this person's ever riding that, and they get caught off guard because they don't know where the camera is. And if they knew that ahead of time, it can make their vacation better. They've got this awesome keepsake, this photo. They knew where to look exactly. They knew to pose or something like that on a ride. So I love that idea that it can simply be something that makes your vacation better, because that would include saving time, saving money, so I think that's actually the perfect definition for it.
Oh, yay. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
It was a real struggle. That was a real struggle for me to, as I was writing, just thinking, isn't this, I'm not sure. But out of some of those things, like the ride photos, where to find the ride photos, also came some hacks. Like if Splash Mountain was notorious for people doing things that aren't going to make the cut with, the cast members who are looking to make sure all the photos are G-rated.
Yes.
So out of that, looking at that, I discovered that if your ride photo is deleted because somebody has done something, you can ask to ride again.
Oh, wow.
And often you can get right back on and ride again. Now, I make no promises. This is something that you have to ask the cast member for, but definitely, just say, oh, my ride photo was deleted. And like you said, this is my only, this is my one chance at riding this. Can I ride again? And very often they will let you.
Yeah. So with the book, which of course is this, I got in my hand, is the printed, physical media. The first edition came out in 2019. Now you have this one that's just come out. As things continue to progress, do you have a way of keeping readers up to date on some of the things that will obviously change throughout the printed version? How do you keep folks up to date when there are going to be some minor changes? Obviously, if there's something major, you're going to probably do another edition, but as small things change, are there ways that you try and reach out to readers or let people know what's been updated?
Yeah, I really need to have a website that's just devoted to updates in the books. But my husband and I have been just absolutely flat out for 20 years, which is why we're doing this RV trip, because we
Wow.
just needed to hit reset. But a couple of things, and you mentioned one, is that we try to update the book, fairly regularly. But another thing is that whenever a book goes to print, there's a certain print run. So this number of books is going to be printed, and when they're sold, we'll do the next print run. So
Okay.
there are times when, usually if something significant has changed, there are times when in the second print run or the third or whatever it's going to be, you can make that change. It's harder, and it is challenging with the book. It's not like, a website,
Yeah.
but yeah, I probably really need to, when we get back, I probably really should have a website for that,
Well,
specific to that.
Well, one of the things I'll say though is in a day of digital, obviously that there are so many things that are digital. There's a lot of research that people do for their vacations online. When you are planning for your trip or you're in the parks, I have to say this printed physical book is incredible. I took
Good.
it with us when we were just there 2 weeks ago. It fits perfectly in a Loungefly, which so many
Excellent.
people are walking around with, and I have a
Yeah.
highlighter that I have with it. And what's so great is that everything's at your fingertips. It's easy to find through the index. If you are preparing for a trip or you're at Disney World, obviously you can find anything you want online, but you have to go look for it. You have to sort through what's true, what's not. You have to, maybe you find a site that you trust. You're going to find ones that you don't trust that are just using clickbait. And what is great about this book is that everything's at your fingertips. So you can easily get to it, access it, say, I'm, looking for something to eat. I'm going to go to that section. Let me find out some hacks on dining, rides, Genie Plus, things like that. So, I think that it's important that people pick up something like this and have with them, whether you carry it in the park or not. It's going to be extremely valuable in planning your trip for sure. What are some of maybe your favorite hacks? Do you have certain ones that a lot of people maybe don't know that could
I
completely change their
do.
vacation?
Yeah. Probably my favorite hacks are the really simple ones that absolutely anybody can do.
Yeah.
And I've mentioned this hack a few times and people are surprised by it. So I guess it's one that maybe a lot of people don't know, but walk single file when you're in a crowd, and that's most of the time at Disney. If you walk in single file rather than, side by side, you are going to get through those crowds so much faster. It's incredible. And it's just super simple. It doesn't cost, it's just easy to do. Anybody can do it. But if you do that and you have children with you, make sure there's, an adult behind the children who can
Yeah.
watch to make sure that you're all going in the right direction and nobody gets lost. But that's just, I think, one of the easiest, best hacks.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried that?
Yeah, it's funny. My wife, who she's little, she's 5'2", 100 pounds, and she can get through crowds very easily. Me being 6'3", over 200 pounds, it's sometimes a little bit harder. So she usually is kind of like the lead, and she's able to get through as I follow her through the crowds and kind of, I say, snake her way through and get to areas much quicker. And then I'm just keeping up with her. But it can make a big difference, and it makes a difference to the people around you. When you're walking 4 or 5 wide and you decide to stop in the middle of Main Street to think of where you're going to have lunch, you've got groups of people that are behind you,
Yeah.
that are now stuck because they can't get around. So I think in general of just even helping the people around you, that can be, very useful for everyone. So
Yeah. Simplest hack in the entire book.
yeah.
Another one that I think a lot of people maybe don't know, and it's just a fun hack. It's not like a, time saving or money saving, but um, I love going into World Showcase. And again, I just love the details. And I remember going into like Morocco and China and Japan and seeing all these like signs that were written in the language
Hmm.
of that pavilion and just wondering what they say. So you can actually download Google Translate, and it's got a feature on it that reads those signs and tells you what they say,
Very cool.
which I thought was just such a cool thing to do. So I included that in the book. And China, some of the signs say exactly what you think they're going to say.
Yeah.
Some of them are kind of funny, or they're just poetic. I think that's a great hack.
That's great. And and that's when you look at a hack and something that'll make your vacation better is slowing down and doing things like that, is taking all that in. People are, they go to Disney, and it's understandable in a lot of ways. They've spent a lot of money. They might not get to go as often as like we do and all, but they rush their way through this checklist of things they have to do. And they're just going from, one ride to another, one show to another, attractions and dining. And they don't take the time to look around and say, what do these signs say? What is this about? We were actually at Universal back in January. We took my daughter, who turned 16, and her boyfriend, and that was kind of her birthday present. And I noticed he took his phone out and he was pointing it at all the different plants. I was like, what are you doing? And he's like, well, Google has this image search. He's like, I was kind of wondering what type of plant this was. And so same kind of thing, is now I've started
Yeah.
to go through the parks, and I love that translate. I hadn't thought of that one, but I'll go through the parks sometimes with the Google image and just take photos of plants and trees and be like, oh, I wonder what kind that is. That's beautiful. Is that something you can get around here? And just starting to do those types of things. So I love that idea of getting to slow down and just enjoy all that Disney has to offer. Like that's
I
a
think
big hack.
it is, and it's one of the major hacks, a theme that really runs through the book, especially for the newbie hacks. Um, it's probably the most counterintuitive thing that you're going to do. Just, I paid all this money. I drove or flew a long way to be here, and I am going to pack in as much as I can. But what really happens is you end up going home and just thinking, what the heck did I just do?
Yeah.
And you don't remember it. So it is really counterintuitive to maybe arrive early your first couple of days when you're all hyped up and you're not sleeping. Take that midday break, come back in the evening, and I think you get so much more out of it. And attitude, especially in summer when it's really hot, or at Christmas time when it's packed, your attitude gets adjusted
Yeah.
and you can just enjoy it so much more.
Yeah. Yeah, you could have an entire book, I think, on just how to have the right attitude and and deal with situations that are going to come up because, well, that's one of the things. Like, do you feel that now obviously if you've never been to Disney, or you only go maybe once a year, once every 5 years, you're going to plan a lot. Do you think even as an average park goer, though, maybe locals back when you're at your home in Orlando, can you go to a park and wing it anymore? Or do you have certain steps that you would say, look, you don't have to have a plan. Like you don't have to plan out every hour, and you don't plan what your lunch is or your dinner or the ride you're doing. But do you have some tips on people that want to go and kind of just wing it? Because you can't just show up. I mean, especially as pass holders, we still got to make park reservations. So are there,
Yeah.
there things that you are there things you would say to folks that want to not have a plan, like almost like they need a light plan to not have a plan?
Yeah, I think you can wing it, but I think you really, if you're new to the parks, it's not a great idea to wing it.
Yeah.
But people show up all the time and they don't have a plan. So if that happens, one of the hacks in the book is, you're standing there, you're holding your park map, you don't know what your whole group is just like, okay, what do we do? don't just stand there in the middle of the pavement looking at your park map. Get in line.
Yeah.
And by the time you've hammered out some kind of a plan, at least for half the day, you're going to be at the front of the line and boarding a ride.
Yeah.
So you can a little bit wing it, but it's just, it is so much harder now to do that than it used to be.
Yeah.
If you're just going for the atmosphere, great, make no plans. But if you really want to, do some of the rides, you need to plan in advance and sit down with your group before you leave. Have everybody choose their top 3 and make those your Genie Plus or make those your priorities. And then from there, whatever else you do is sort of icing on the cake.
Yeah, I think that's honestly one of the best hacks that you just said, is to sit down with the people in your party and have everybody tell you what's most important to them.
Yeah.
Because, you can easily get in a situation where the person you're always going to have the planner and the person who's going to do the research and they're going to figure everything out. But if they're only figuring out what they want to see and do, and they don't ask people to speak up, they're going to end up missing out on what those people truly want to do. And they're going to have a very different vacation.
They're going to have a mutiny.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And you see it all the time.
Yeah, I know.
There's the group that, one person is not a Disney fan at all. They don't really want to be there. So to give them the best experience, talk about it ahead of time. And I think another really great hack, if you're going in a large group or as, extended family, split up sometimes. You don't have to do everything together.
Yeah.
And then when you come back together for a meal or at the end of the day, gosh, you've got so much more to talk about because you've done different things and you've had different experiences. But to try to force people into a regimented plan, have your plan when you arrive and be ready to ditch it when you start seeing before the mutiny happens.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And you bring up that other great point of taking the time away. For me, it's getting up earlier than anybody else in the room and just going to the food court and getting a coffee and just sitting and decompressing, getting ready for the day. And if everybody feels like, well, everybody, let's get up at 6 a.m. Let's all go get coffee. Let's do this. Everybody's going to want to kill you by the end of the week, if not sooner. So I really
like
do
day
love that.
3.
Oh,
day 3 is crucial. That's when everybody collapses.
They're going to be done. I think it's amazing that you've been going since the opening of Disney World. Obviously, things have changed that nobody could ever expect.
Yeah.
Do you think that, are there ways that what Disney has implemented, especially when it comes to technology, do you think are better than they were a decade ago or 2 decades ago? Or has technology ruined some of the magic, do you believe?
That's a really tough question because it's yes and it's also no.
Yeah.
Disney's website 10 years ago was abysmal.
Yeah.
It was awful. It was so hard to use. And it's much better now, even though it's not perfect. So, being able to do some of this planning in advance, make your dining reservations, plan, any kind of special add-ons that you want to do, I think that's better. Mobile ordering.
Yeah.
I think mobile ordering is pure genius. I love it.
Yeah.
But I'm not a huge fan of having to be on your phone all the time. I'm not a huge fan of, you should be looking at your kids or at the people you're with or at the scenery and at the plants, like you say, not sitting there on your phone trying to find out, can you replace whatever Genie Plus you didn't want to get the one you did? So I think there are good things about it, and I think there are things that are not so great.
Yeah. And I think that could go for technology in general, especially with social media. And I'm, I do it all the time, and I'm trying to get better, like many people, where, even 20 years ago, you took the photos on your camera and you didn't worry about them. You took a photo, you took in the moment, and then, a week later you got home and you had them developed and you went back and you looked at them and you remembered. And now it's like, you got to take the photo, you got to look at it, you got to make sure it's good. You're going to edit it if it's not. You're going to take it again. You're going to post it to social media. And next thing you know, you've missed, the next great thing that's happened. So that kind of leads me to my next question that I really just came to me, and I like to ask this of a lot of people that create content the way that you do, because you're a writer, you research. I love that you and your husband are kind of taking this break in a sense to go travel the country in an RV.
Yeah.
But how do you separate work and play? Because you have taken, one of the most magical places on earth. You've taken a kid and adult's playground, a place you're supposed to go and put everything else aside and not work, and you go there to work. How do you balance those, though, where maybe it doesn't feel like a job? Are there times that you just take off and say, I'm going to a park today and I'm not going to worry about a hack, I'm not going to worry about a note? Are you constantly thinking, I need to get more content for maybe the next edition or your next book?
Well, I'd like to say that we do take those nice breaks, but the fact is we didn't. And for 20 years, we were just absolute freelancer.
Yeah.
You've got to crank it out. You can never be off. So we lived right behind, as I said, we lived right behind Magic Kingdom. So we used to drive over to Epcot and just do a couple laps around World Showcase as our exercise.
Yeah.
But, that can be, you can't really do it in the summer because it's so packed. You can't get your heart rate up at all. But, yeah, I'd like to say that we did take time just to enjoy the parks. But since writing Hidden Magic, I can't go into a park and not be looking.
Yeah.
So that is why we had to, and in our families, we used to joke, our families think we're always on vacation. We're never on vacation.
Yeah.
So yeah, this trip is trying to make up for 20 years of not doing what we should have been doing all along. And that is just to go in and remember why we enjoy it so much.
That's amazing. And good for you all. Like, congratulations on that. I think that's incredible for you to take that time and say, you know what, it's kind of time to take a break. It's time to enjoy things, because we fall victim to that, being in the parks as well. We're going next weekend for our charity event that we do every year in Disney World. And we're going to be there for 5 days, which is a lot for us. We usually go down for like a weekend. And I just sent my wife a list about 20 minutes ago. I went through and found all the snacks that we somehow haven't tried yet. And I sent her a list. I was like, here's snacks. Well, let's see how many we can get in during that 5 days. We're going to get this content. We're going to be there. And then, there's part of me that's like, all right, but then you also have to, put in a to-do list of relaxing. Let's sit by the pool for some time. Let's, grab some coffee in the morning and relax. Let's enjoy the balcony or something at the resort. So I love that you're taking that time for yourself now, though. That's amazing.
It's been really useful, and hopefully we'll get back and just go, this is the most amazing place ever. And now we remember why. But, taking breaks sometimes can just mean, like Nomad Lounge, the back porch area, and just go sit there for an hour.
Yeah.
Sometimes taking breaks just means, finding these quiet places in the parks where you can get away from it, but still, be right there. But yeah, as you know, and as you've just said, when this is your job, you're always on.
Yeah.
It's tough.
So are you writing now that you're on your RV excursion? Are you still doing some work and doing some travel writing and all?
Yeah, we are. Yes. Yeah. We do a lot of writing beyond Disney and Orlando and the theme parks. So we're writing a monthly article for a UK newspaper. My husband's from the UK, so we do a lot of work there as well. And he's the original author of the Brit Guide to Orlando.
Very cool.
So, that's been another big project. But so we're writing for the UK newspaper. We're doing a blog on this trip it's just meant to be fun. It's nothing earth-shattering, but it's just what we're doing and what we're seeing. We hope we'll probably get a book out of it at the end. So, but really we're trying our hardest to just disconnect.
Yeah.
And we're in a campground right now. We're in a state park, which is absolutely gorgeous. We finally sat outside and just sat there listening to nature, which we haven't done a lot of because we've been on the go so much.
Yeah.
So, it's hard to, when you're in that overachiever mode, I guess. It's hard to break away.
What are some of your favorite places that you've already been to or you're looking forward to going to outside of the theme parks?
On this trip?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're in our just past our 11th month, so we've only got maybe what, 3.5 weeks left
Okay.
before we get home.
Yeah.
But Yellowstone was way up on our list. We've been there a few times. We absolutely love Yellowstone. We could do a year in Yellowstone.
Wow.
So we did visit that. That was one of our big priorities. Utah came as a big surprise.
Okay.
It's gorgeous. And it's got a lot of national parks, but you almost don't need to go into them because the whole place is a national park.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. The Dakotas surprised us. I mean, just everywhere we've been has been kind of, you know how you have an idea of what each state is or what it's
Yeah.
about?
Yeah.
Man, it has surprised us how different to what our preconceived notions have been, and also how they've been kind of right as well.
Yeah. I'm sure.
Um, but Yellowstone, if you can only choose one place in the
Okay.
whole country, go to Yellowstone. That's a
Okay.
great place.
So I don't mean to turn this into like a RV episode or anything, but I just find it so fascinating. I think it's such a cool thing that y'all are doing. Is there an average amount of time that you spend in each location before going to the next?
Well, we started out, we had to go from Florida to Michigan uh, for family reasons. So we did that in 6 days, which is
Wow.
breakneck speed in
Yeah.
a big RV.
Yeah.
That's fast in a big RV. We didn't really stop anywhere. Then we had an itinerary that we'd hammered out over the course of about 4 years. We were supposed to do this trip in 2020, what was it? 2020.
Okay.
But of course,
Yeah.
that didn't
Yeah.
happen. So we hammered out this full itinerary of where we wanted to go. And we just were moving too fast. We were moving every 3 days, every 5 days.
Wow.
So I think a week is probably minimum to really get under the skin of a place. A month is better,
Yeah.
but
That's
it depends
amazing.
on where you are. Some places have only needed 4 or 5 days, but some have needed, 2, 3 weeks.
Yeah. That's incredible. That's so cool. Good, good for
Yeah.
y'all. So bringing it back to Disney, what's your favorite park? Does that change as time moves on, or do you have a set park that you just always love?
It's the one I'm in.
Yeah.
Whatever park I'm in is my favorite park in that moment.
That's such a great answer.
I love all of them for different reasons. Epcot is probably a sentimental favorite. I love Epcot at night, just walking around and the fairy lights and the trees and World Showcase.
Yeah.
I love Animal Kingdom, this richness of the storytelling there. Magic Kingdom, of course, is just a sentimental favorite for everybody. The nostalgia there. But Hollywood Studios, if you had asked me this before Galaxy's Edge, I would have said Hollywood Studios was probably the one that I went into the least because it just didn't pull me the way the other parks do. But Galaxy's Edge, I could spend, and I have spent full days just walking around there. It is so full of detail.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just whichever one I'm in at the moment.
So and I know we touched on this a little bit earlier about how you plan and you prepare and you research and stuff for some of these updates and changes. Let's just say, okay, so D23 that's coming in August, we're hoping for some major announcements, maybe some actual, concrete announcements about what's happening to Dino Land, what's going to be beyond
Yeah.
Big Thunder Mountain. We're going to get, hopefully very soon, Tiana's Bayou Adventure opening date. When do you start the process of maybe putting research into those? Do you start at the announcement of, okay, Tropical Americas are definitely coming to Dino Land, and here's what it'll include, and here's the plans, and we're breaking ground on this day. We hope to open just say by 2026 or something. When do you start doing some of the research going into that? Because we know that there's going to be lots of rumors. There's going to be lots of, information that isn't necessarily true. How do you handle something as big as an expansion like that to make sure that it can make it into your book and you're not scrambling for your next edition because it just opened or something?
Yeah, I'm going to be doing a fourth edition of The Hidden Magic of Walt Disney World sometime after we get back from this trip. But I start, as soon as I'm done with the one I'm working on, I start the next one
Yeah.
because things do change. And so when something is announced, I do start paying very close attention. I pay attention to what some of the rumors are, but you kind of know who's just throwing stuff out there and who actually has maybe some insider knowledge.
Yeah.
So I pay attention to the people that I trust. And then once the info starts coming out from Disney, that's when I really start weeding out what could be true, what isn't true. And of course, we go to the press events when anything is opened or if they do previews.
Yeah.
And very, very, very lucky to have access to Imagineers who can answer questions. So it's just this ongoing process of always paying attention, but then fine-tuning it when official word starts coming out from somebody at Disney.
Yeah. So I really do think that everybody should pick this book up. I absolutely love it. We'll have it in the parks with us again next weekend. We're excited for that. Where can everybody find you? Where can they find this book and your other books?
The books are at all booksellers. I actually met somebody in the park who bought one, A Hidden Magic in Singapore, I think it was.
Wow.
Yeah, she was holding it, so I signed it for her, and she had bought it in Singapore. So they're at all booksellers online and in bookstores. We can be found on MEI-Travel Media. So if you just do a search on that, you'll find all our social media. You'll find our website. We're pretty easy to find.
That's amazing. Well, this has been fun. I've loved learning more about you and the process for writing this book. I think it's such a cool thing to see this and see everything that you put into it. And, as a veteran Disney goer myself, I have gone through this thing and been like, oh, hey, I didn't even think of that. So even, whether you're a newbie or you think you're a Disney veteran, there's value in this book completely. And there's a lot of reminders too. There's only so much knowledge you can hold in your head, especially when you're on a trip or you're, taking somebody as a veteran that's never been and you want to show them around. And this will be, a go-to guide for me, I think, for sure. So I definitely recommend everybody goes out and picks this up. Anything else that you wanted to add before we say goodbye today?
Gosh, we covered a lot, so I feel like you've done a terrific job as a host.
Well, thank you. I know you spoke with one of my friends, Kurt, with the Geekin' on WDW podcast, I think a couple weeks ago. So that helped a little as a precursor to get me ready to chat with you. But this has been super cool and informative, and I really appreciate you taking some time and coming on with me today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I really enjoyed our talk.
Awesome. Hopefully we'll talk very soon, and maybe we can meet in the park one day and I can get you to sign my copy.
That'd be fantastic. I'd love to do that.
Thanks again so much to Susan for coming on and sharing all about her Disney hacks. Definitely make sure you head to your local bookstore and grab a copy of any one of her books, or head out to Amazon and order. Most likely it'll be at your house tomorrow, definitely in time for your next trip to Disney World. As always, thank you all so much for listening. We have a lot of great content coming up very soon, including our cruise on the Disney Magic. So make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can get brand new episodes every Tuesday and Friday. And of course, as long as you're out there, I would be thankful. Rhonda would be thankful. I'm sure Susan would be thankful if you could please leave us a rating and review, because it definitely helps our show grow. That's all we've got. We'll see you real soon.
Jeremy and Rhonda are more than a little fond of Disney World, so they made this podcast to share it all with you. Reports and resorts, top 10 lists of all sorts, Main Street Magic's bringing it home for you.